While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast. Mindset. So we've talked about mindset, kind of talked around it more so on the podcast. But how do you get started working on your mindset? How do you conceptualize or put into action a plan to improve your mindset so that your subconscious mind and your conscious mind are working for you, not against you? So I brought in a world-renowned expert, Miss Heather Hakes. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we all know mindset. I think most people by now know mindset's important. But one thing I hear from patients and clients is, well, Dr. Tim, how do I get started on my mindset? How do I know if I'm improving? Can you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of a loaded question, but to make it simple, the very first step to creating any change in your life. So, for example, I like to think of us, the center point, as a spoke on a wheel. So you, the individual, are the center point. And then we can talk about the major life buckets: health, wealth, relationships, business, hobbies, happiness. All of those are reflections or spokes coming from us. So the first step to create change in any of those major life buckets is awareness. That is the first step.
Absolutely. And what have you seen in the past, 4 years with everything happening in the world? Have you seen a trend in the clients you work with in terms of people's mindset starting out a little bit more negatively than, prior to the pandemic?
I can't say that there's really a direct correlation, but according to psychology, statistics state that you have somewhere between 60 and 70,000 thoughts every single day, and 80% tend to be negative if you're not living mindfully and intentionally, which is exactly what I preach.
Absolutely. So for people who are just starting out with, say, mindfulness, meditation, I know you said the first step is awareness. So do you recommend people start with journaling or stopping during the day, just kind of recentering? Or what are some actionable steps people can take around mindset?
The very first thing I walk my clients through is what I call the thought inventory. And that's why awareness is key. I'll break it down because I like to give simple, tangible steps. And so something I talk about often is called the thought cycle. 4 steps. Everything begins with thought. That is the first domino. Your thoughts create your emotions and feelings. Those lead to the actions or inactions you're taking in life and create every result. So using that simple 4-step process, you can reverse engineer. Look at your current results, your bank account, your health, your happiness, relationships. If you're not satisfied, which most people aren't, reverse engineer. Okay, are you stuck in self-sabotage? Yes. Procrastination, negative mindset, self-doubt. What emotions are fueling that? And then it all starts with thought. And that's why, the first step is a thought inventory. You have to become aware of the subconscious, the 95% of the picture running the show, because what most people don't realize we're living in autopilot. I did. I was, for me, same shit, different day. Rinse, wash, repeat. Cheering on Friday, dreading Monday, week in, week out, and nothing changed until, that's why the personal development industry is one of the fastest growing. I think it's a multi-billion-dollar industry because people are dissatisfied in life. They feel stuck.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so you mentioned self-sabotage. I see that in a lot of clients and patients. And it can really obviously, derail your life. And a lot of times I think
Yeah.
you correct me if I'm wrong, but it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where,
100%.
yeah. So how do people, who in their conscious mind, they want to do better, but subconsciously they're sabotaging themselves? How can they course correct in regards to that?
Sure. So I love this. I like to think of our mind as a mental garden, and things that are in the way, think of them as rocks, pebbles, weeds, but I call it pull the weeds, plant new seeds. Dr. Bruce Lipton, I love his quote that your life is a printout of your subconscious programming. So you may have a conscious desire, 5%, that you want more money, you want financial freedom, you want abundance, you want ease in your relationships, you want business success. But if 95% of your programming is, I'm unworthy, money's hard to come by, there's no good men or women out there, whatever those stories are playing, you can see that 5%, no matter how hard you struggle and effort, cannot override 95%.
Absolutely. And so tell us about your transition from the corporate world. What type of work were you doing? And what sort of broke the camel's back, so to speak, to push you into the personal development mindset industry?
What changed the trajectory of my life? Sure. So I've been a little unconventional all my life. I've been reading personal development and psychology books since I was a young teen. And I never felt like I fit in. But of course, we want to fit in. So I did what we're conditioned to do. And I'm using these words very intentionally. But, we're conditioned, go to college, get a degree, climb the corporate ladders, um, go on vacations. And then once you retire, you can live the good life. That's what we're conditioned to believe, that's happiness. And I did the corporate thing for 10 years. I had my bachelor's degree and then I got my paralegal, and that's all boring stuff. But I just got to the point in my life, I had everything that was supposed to make me happy. Engaged to be married, we just bought a new home, traveling, like making good money in corporate, and I was not happy. And that's the other thing. We are conditioned to believe in external factors creating internal effects, and that is backwards. So anyway, for me, my breaking point was realizing he's not a bad guy, but that wasn't the right relationship for me. So I walked right before my wedding. I invested in my first coach, actually through Tony Robbins' organization. So I hit that gamut early, and now I've definitely gone a different direction. But I got my first coach to help with clarity, accountability. What am I doing with my life? Which led to quitting corporate, taking some time off, my own sabbatical, finding my way, which led me to coaching today. I published a book. I have my own podcast, and living life on my terms, which we all have the capability to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, there's a good quote from Jim Carrey. He says, he tells the story of his dad and how he got fired after like 29 or 30 years in a corporate job that he hated. And
Yeah.
he says essentially that if you can fail doing what you hate, you may as well just go ahead and do what you love.
Yes. And look, corporate is great for a lot of people. So if you're
Mhm.
in your 9 to 5, if you feel fulfilled and on point, then that is your role. But many of us who believe that's the only way, I'm just here to tell you there's many other ways.
Right. And I think, not to get off on a tangent, but with like network marketing, a lot of times the products are very legitimate, but people are so conditioned that, oh, if it's not a 9 to 5, it's not legit. I mean, I know this was late 2012, when I took my practice virtual, people were like, do you work anymore? I'm like, yeah, I work harder than I've ever worked. Why would you ask that? Well, I see your car home all the time. that sort of mindset. And so how do you, people who are struggling because of their family, their friends, their relationships, like they're personally ready to take the leap. They're afraid of the judgment from
Uh,
their relatives and loved ones.
well, you got to let that go. This is your life. And I love this idea that you're going to be judged and criticized no matter what you do. You might as well live life on your terms. And people who are afraid of judgment and criticism, you have nothing to prove. You
Right.
if you need to be validated externally, you will never find that sustainably.
Right. Yeah, and that's something I say a lot to people in general. You know, like Tom Brady has a great quote: "I don't need any external motivation. The fires that burn inside of me are more than enough."
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the same way. I feel like it's a slippery slope. If you look externally for validation, the same people who validated you can take it away and try and, quote unquote, destroy you or take you down.
Yeah.
So how do you encourage people to go about learning to validate themselves versus seeking it? Because we're taught, Seth Godin says in Stop Stealing Dreams, third grade or first grade, raise your hand, wait to be called on. Life doesn't work that way. It's the exact opposite. So how do you coach people to start that process?
I mean, the biggest thing is that uh, gosh, it takes a lot of courage. Number one, it takes courage to veer off. But number two, it's, like if you look at the regrets of the dying, many of them have, regrets, should have started earlier. I didn't follow my dreams. I didn't say I love you, whatever it is. And I think the biggest thing that ignites me is knowing, it may be cliche, but tomorrow is not guaranteed. So many people are living assuming and thinking they have decades to live, and they put things off. They put their happiness off. And I'm just here to like shout from the rooftops, your life is happening now. Take charge now. But here's what you were touching on. Anytime we give our power away and external people or circumstances control our way of thinking and feeling, that's technically a victim mindset. And you don't want to live that way, because then traffic will irritate you, an email will ruin your day, something somebody said, the stock market, whatever. If you allow that, then you're conditionally living, number one, under stress, which number one cause for all disease, right?
Right.
But when you learn to self-regulate, when you learn to, that life is literally from the inside out, you take your power back and literally become unstoppable.
Absolutely. So, your book, tell us a little bit about that. Is it more about your personal journey or a combination of that, along with coaching people on actionable steps to recreate their positive mindset?
So my first book, Take the Leap, really is a bit of a story, my journey from contentment to fulfillment. There's definitely personal development practices within that. The book I'm currently working on really is more like the guidebook, the handbook, so that the coaching tools and techniques are more accessible to anyone.
Absolutely. So, something you said resonated with me: contentment versus fulfillment. Can you
Mhm.
sort of operationally define what those are for listeners?
Yeah. So most people are settling for mediocrity. This will do, the status quo, because again, it's a mindset thing. And they're thinking it's a lot of conditioning and it's what we grew up in. But if you find evidence, for example, there are multi-billionaires in the world. It's the 4-minute mile rule. Find evidence of somebody doing the thing you want, living the lifestyle, having something you desire, and realize that is evidence. If it's possible for them, it's possible for you. But anybody, for me, contentment is going through the motions. Like, you kind of feel numbed out on life.
Right. And you don't feel anything, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise.
Yeah.
And to your point about the 4-minute mile, I think, a lot of, after Roger Bannister broke that record, then in the next year to 2 years, tens or dozens of people broke
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
so they already had the physical ability. They just need to get over the mind hurdles, the mind viruses that, were holding them back.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Maverick, the newest one with
Yeah.
Top Gun Maverick? Okay, so there's a scene in that movie. Hopefully you'll remember it. What I love about this scene was it showed the power of belief, just like this 4 minute mile rule, and mindset. Do you remember when so that team was brought together to do Mission Impossible, right? Something
Mhm.
they're like, well, we think it might be possible, but they'd gone through the testing in that canyon, and they had to come up this really steep climb, and they were failing. What did Tom Cruise do? He got in the jet, he went through the course, he nailed it with time to spare, which shifted I'm getting chills, shifted the entire team's belief system, because now he proved it was possible, and we know how the movie ends.
Wow. Yeah, no, I definitely remember that scene. Absolutely. And so, looking through your bio, you've done a lot. Like you said, you've done the Tony Robbins certifications. You were inspired by Gabby Bernstein, and Dr. Joe Dispenza and Bob Proctor as well.
Yeah.
Who would you say is your current influence outside of your own self?
Yeah, so hands down, and what I love, Tony Robbins, I think is great to get people into personal development. I walked on fire. I got to, but it's very, very surface level. And that's why I know most people are so addicted to the high of going to his events that they don't have that life sustainable change. For me, who I've been studying and fully immersed in the work, is Dr. Joe Dispenza the last 3.5 years. What I love about Dispenza is he not only teaches the science, the what and the why, how we work, neuroscience, our habitual patterns, behaviors, the subconscious, but he brings in this, the meditative side, the mindfulness, shows you the how, the formula, the practices through meditation and becoming. It's what I coach my clients through, version 2.0, becoming your future self, acting as if, because when through repetition and consistency, you literally can change any current circumstance in your life.
Do you have any tools, whether it's like I have a Muse headband charging next to me, that you recommend for people? Obviously, it's not working on mindset per se, but more meditation. Do you have any quote unquote external gadgets that can facilitate the process?
Well, number one, I never want to rely on anything externally. But number two, I'd love to kind of debunk, because a lot of people still think, thank goodness, meditation is way more mainstream now. But I think a lot of people still have a stigma. Oh, that's woo woo. That's for hippy
Mhm.
dippy tree huggers. Here's what I want you to know. I went down the rabbit hole through definitions and looking it up. Meditation, I've boiled it down to this definition, very simple. It's sensory deprivation, and it's a mindfulness practice of training your awareness and focus. That's it. It's turning off the external stimulation and training your awareness and focus to where you want it to go. That's it.
Yeah, when I was practicing in Atlanta, I had a patient come in, and I'd recommend she start with just 5 minutes of meditation or quiet time. And I asked her how it was going. She said, "Dr. Tim, I can't do that." And I said, "Well, why? What's going on?" She said, "That's the work of the devil." And this was 3, 4 years ago. And so, yeah, to your point, it is a lot more mainstream now. But I'm in the deep South, so there's a little bit more hurdles here. Um, in terms of journaling, gratitude. Let's talk about gratitude
Oh,
and how
yes.
that plays into the work that you do.
Okay, so I love gratitude. And this is something I started a gratitude practice. I grew up watching Oprah. I started a gratitude practice. I was 8 years old. And back then I remember watching an Oprah episode, and she talked about the gratitude journal. So since I was 8, 30 years now, I've had a daily gratitude practice, and now I don't write it, but I simply every single night laying in bed, I think of at least 5 things from that day that I'm grateful for. It could be the sun shining, a call from a friend, even, if you have off days, I'm human, I have off days too. It
Mhm.
could be, the shirt on my back, shelter over my head, whatever. But even Dispenza says it best, that being in a continual state of gratitude sets you up for, he says something to the effect of, gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership. So when we
Wow.
like Nikola Tesla, I love his quote. His infamous quote is, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, vibration. And that's why I love quantum physics. And when you are thinking and feeling from a grateful heart, a grateful mind for things in your life, you literally are a magnet. You have more things to be grateful for to come to you.
So it sounds like you work with a lot of corporate type people, high performers.
Oh, yeah.
Have you been surprised at people who are on the surface very, very successful, however you choose to define that, but
Yeah.
their mindset is really negative?
Yes, but again, back to earlier, if 80% of your thoughts are negative, until you become mindful and intentional and start focusing, because whatever you focus on expands. But yes, generally speaking, and primarily I work with males. I've definitely worked with very ambitious, driven females, but it tends to be more male specific. And men, I have so much compassion and love and empathy for you guys, because since you were little, think about, boys are taught to suppress, not express emotions. And so men think that it's weak and vulnerable to ask for help or to want to talk about things. But suppressing all that stuff is what is creating so much stress, anxiety, burnout in these men.
Yeah, there's a great book. I'm sure you've read it. Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. Have you heard of that book?
I haven't.
Yeah, it's a great book, and it just touches on basically everything you just summarized and how it manifests in different organs and different diseases,
Yeah.
health imbalances. And I would describe most Americans as emotionally constipated.
Yeah.
And I was born, right, wrong, or otherwise, essentially without a filter between my brain and my mouth. So it can be a good thing and a bad thing. But I would definitely rather err on the side of, expressing my feelings, making sure my voice is heard. And the same way, other people, I want other people to treat me the same way. I might not like hearing it in the moment, but I feel like anyone who's your true friend and who truly cares about you will be open and honest.
Well, and what I really teach my clients, and even in all my content, is it's learning how to respond, not react. Because when you're continually reacting, whenever you're triggered, something somebody said, something somebody did, that trigger, think of it as a check engine light. That is a gift. That person is bringing a gift because it's some unresolved emotional block, whatever it may be. But when you can learn to self regulate, which is through thoughts, emotions, breathing techniques, lots of ways to do it, then you do get out of autopilot, get out of that habitual way of being unconscious, and your entire life will change. And most of my clients tell me after 2 to 3 weeks, they already notice a change because they're learning new things. I'm sure you've heard the quote, knowledge is power. I do not believe that. Knowledge alone is not power. Experience is, implementation is, application is.
Absolutely. So after, if I would have met you 10 years ago and told you, in 10 years, we're going to have this conversation, we're going to be on a podcast talking about this, what would your response have been?
Gosh, 28-year-old Heather. No, I was so in the corporate world and living for the weekends, and I would have been like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about.
And so, how did your family, your friends respond to your transition from the security of a corporate job to
Oh, yeah.
you being an entrepreneur?
That's a great question, especially ties into something you asked earlier. Because I had this burning desire, this intuitive nudge, I was meant for more. A lot of fear leaving, quote, security and stability of a paycheck, right? I had a lot of fear, a lot of unknowns, but I'm so grateful that I at least had enough courage and to be bold to follow that nudge, which we all have access to. But yes, of course, people are like, what are you doing? That's crazy. Why would you leave stability? My parents, thankfully, are extremely supportive. I don't think my dad understood it. Very old school, worked for one company until he retired with a pension.
Right.
So think of that paradigm shift. But I do have a very supportive parents, and I think they were kind of like, I don't know, you'll find your way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's great that you have a supportive family. It's almost my mom and dad have a pension, but that's almost unheard of now.
Right.
I mean, we have to create our own pensions.
Yes.
And so I think, the illusion of, the security, quote unquote, security of a corporate job or working for someone else, you kind of suppress your own feelings. And a quote that I heard a few weeks back was, a salary is something your employer dangles in front of you to get you to forget your hopes, dreams, and aspirations.
Yes. I've seen that too.
Yeah. And so, what's something that you've obviously done a lot of transformation over the past 10 years? What's something today that you wish you would have known 10 or 12 years ago?
Oh gosh. So that's a question I always ask people, what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah.
And for me, it's I might not have understood it back then, but number one, to believe in yourself, to I would have veered off the conditioned path a long time ago, but also at the same time, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I needed to go through those experiences and whatever to get to where I'm at. So I don't regret anything. I don't wish it had been sooner. I think that is trusting in life, trusting my path. But I think it really is that self-belief, that
Mhm.
confidence, the tuning into my voice a lot
Right.
sooner.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. We're going to put up all your links and your bio. We'll let you know when the show goes live, and hopefully we can have you on next year for an update. And do you have an estimated date or
No,
time frame?
first one took about 9 months start to finish, and this one, I mean, there's definitely good draft mode. I'm just not time pressured, and when it's supposed to happen, it will.
Awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Heather. And we appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.